Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to Love and Abuse. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I have a question from someone that I'll just call Mary. Mary asks, do you have any thoughts about the victim of emotional or verbal abuse having an emotional affair? That was the extent of her question. In fact, I had to add a little bit to that question because really, she just wants to know what my thoughts are on emotional affairs when it comes to being in an emotionally or verbally abusive relationship. And I am assuming that she's asking this because when you can't get love and connection from the person that you're with, you probably want to find that elsewhere, or you might be compelled, or maybe you're considering finding that connection elsewhere. And so, yes, I do have some thoughts on this. The very first thing I'm going to say about this is that any relationship outside the relationship that contains components of what a romantic relationship should be about creates a very complex and sometimes dangerous, but especially difficult situation. I'm not necessarily going to say that you shouldn't do this, but I am going to say that if you do this, you introduce a very complex variable in your life, not just your relationship, but in your life. Because almost always any affair is discovered. Almost always. And because of that, you're in a very dangerous territory. It's hard, I understand. You're in a difficult relationship already. You're not getting your needs met, your emotional needs, and sometimes your physical needs. But in this case, I'm talking about an emotional affair. But sometimes, or often, that can be just as much as a violation of the boundaries of the relationship. Now, I understand the other side of this too, because if you're the victim of any type of abuse, you have already experienced a violation in the boundaries of the relationship. And if you've already experienced the violation of the boundaries, then maybe you think it's fair game because you have been betrayed because of the violation of the relationship boundaries, that maybe you think it's fair to go out and do the same thing. And maybe that is not this person's goal at all. Maybe they don't want to say, well, because you did this, I'm going to do that. Maybe it does come down to, I just want to get my emotional needs met. I just want to connect. I just want to love. I just want to be loved. I want to be respected. I want to be cared for. I want to be cared about. I want to feel supported. All of those components of what a real romantic relationship should be. And when you're not getting those met, should you seek another relationship on top of your relationship? If you do, you are introducing a very difficult variable to your life because you might as well accept that the relationship outside the relationship will be discovered. I said I'm not going to tell you not to. That doesn't mean I don't have an opinion on it. I don't think you should. But that's me. That's my personal bias. That's my personal judgment, and it shouldn't apply to you. If we were having coffee in a coffee house and you told me that you were thinking about having an emotional affair or you've met someone, I would say you're crazy. You're crazy because you already have one relationship that you're a part of, and now you're introducing a second one. But again, that's me as a friend saying, don't do it, that's crazy. But as I look at it from a third person perspective and all the variables, I can understand why you might want this, or you do want this. I can understand. I totally get it. And as someone who has worked with couples and individuals on both sides of emotional abuse, I can tell you from an objective perspective, somebody who's seen all the outcomes that occur when you introduce these variables, these very dangerous variables, I can tell you that it never goes well. That's why as a friend, I say, that's crazy, don't do it. But as an objective observer, I can understand why you want to. And I'm not here to tell you not to. I'm just here to tell you that when you do that, it introduces a very dangerous, very difficult, very complex variable, not only into the relationship, but into your life. And I know sometimes the relationship is your life. That's really what it feels like. My life is the relationship, is my life. And when you introduce another relationship on top of the relationship you have, it gets more complex, because what you have in the abusive relationship is already complex. So this is sort of like taking a shaky foundation and putting another floor on that foundation, putting a second floor, a third floor, a fourth floor, and you're building upon this foundation. And maybe you put another wing on the side that is all built on this shaky foundation. And what I mean by all of this is that when your first house is not in order, it's very difficult to have a second house. And I understand the allure, I understand the need, the emotional need for this, but it is very difficult and very dangerous. And I'm probably going to repeat that over and over again. And I'm going to repeat that it's complex, because what ends up happening is you end up juggling on one side all the difficulties of the emotionally abusive relationship. And on the other side, it feels really good. You're getting supported. You're getting validated. Everything that you wanted in the original relationship is happening over here. But in the original relationship, you're not getting any of your needs met. Now, again, I'm not talking you out of it. I am just giving you the difficulties that will come with it, because it will be difficult. It will be very difficult, even though somebody might say, well, it's only an emotional affair. The word affair does apply, and there are boundaries to the relationship. And if one of those boundaries is the act of physical or emotional betrayal, then you have to know that that is going to happen, and that is going to create upset if and probably when it's found out. Now let's come back to the victim of emotional abuse that is thinking about doing this. They're thinking that the relationship boundaries have already been broken, so what's the harm? You may have every legitimate reason to create this other relationship, because you deserve to be supported and treated with kindness and respect. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant. Everything I say, every single episode. So when you are not getting treated that way in the relationship that you are in, then seeking it seems like it should be something that you should do, but something that you deserve to do. I get that. I mean, if my girlfriend was mistreating me day after day after day, I would likely want to seek some sort of opposite of that, some sort of supportive structure, loving, caring structure that made me feel good about myself, that made me feel comfortable, that made me feel at peace, so that I can at least experience something positive on a day-to-day or every other day basis or something. I get that. The problem is when you go outside the boundaries of the relationship, you have to know that it will eventually be discovered and uncovered, and everything that was going on revealed. And then what? then what do? This is why, as a friend, I would say that's crazy. You don't want to bring this variable into your current relationship because it's going to create a mess when it's discovered. As a friend, I'm going to say, yes, it's going to be discovered. But as an objective third-party observer, I'm going to tell you, you could do this. You just have to be aware of the difficulties and the complexities of having another relationship when you already have a relationship in front of you. Now, the relationship you have in front of you, the one that you're in, let's just say it's terrible. Let's just say this person mistreats you every single day and you can't stand it and you just want to feel better about yourself and you just want to be happy. You just want to know that you're worthy and you're loved and all of the wonderful stuff that you deserve. My question to you is, does this current relationship that you're in have a chance? Is this relationship that you're in going to continue to stay the same, which might be terrible, or get worse, which is even worse than terrible, or is there progress? I look at the trend line. We have a conference room, and at the front of the conference room, there's a big whiteboard, and there's a graph on the whiteboard, and the trend line shows the profits and the loss of the company. And as the trend line goes up and to the right, you think, hey, the company's making profit. This is great. More raises, more benefits, more vacations, more employees. Let's grow. This is all progress. If the trend line's going to the right and it's steady and there's some ups and downs, that's great too. If the middle line has been okay, if that middle of the road trend has been okay. You know, we have our ups and downs, but mostly we're happy. But if that trend line has gone down and continues to stay down or stay at a lower path with lots of dips and very few peaks, very few highs, then what you have is a relationship that's going nowhere or getting worse. And one of my questions is always, are you happier more often than not? Are you happy more than 50% of the time? When you answer the question, yes, I'm happier more than 50% of the time, then maybe there's a chance that this relationship can grow and progress and prosper, and you have good communication and you have some arguments here and there, and maybe things are tough. But when you're happier more than 50% of the time, that usually indicates that there is probably work to be done, but you're still going in a good direction. But if you're unhappy most of the time, and it hasn't changed in months or even years, then you have to ask yourself if this relationship is going to continue, because this is the point where you really need to come to a decision. And this is where I'm taking you today, is that when you feel like going outside the relationship, I think it's vital. I think it's the most important thing you can do to decide in your mind if the relationship is over or not. So the relationship that you're in now, I want you to decide if that relationship is over. I'm not asking you to leave. I'm not asking you to break up. I'm not asking you to get a divorce. I'm just asking you, if you ask yourself, is this relationship over? If you don't get a hell yes, it's over, then creating another relationship on top of the one you have now is not a good idea. If you do get a yes or a hell yes, this relationship is over, then your pursuit of another relationship, or, like you said, emotional affair, but that technically is another relationship, because I don't really want us to sugarcoat this at all. When you are connecting with another human being with the components that should make up a romantic relationship, you have a second relationship. So when you introduce this other relationship into your life, yes, the variables are more complex. Now you have to sneak around. Now you have to worry a bit more. You're a bit more stressed. It does add a lot of complexity to your life. But if you, in your mind, say, the relationship I'm in now is over, then I highly recommend that you plan out in your mind at first what you're going to do next. If you wrote to me and said, yeah, well, I can't leave the house, I can't leave the marriage until XYZ is taken care of. My kids are grown up, or saving money, or I'm waiting for my sister to move to the state that we're in so I can move in with her. Whatever it is, I want you to plan that out. Because what's going to happen is that you're going to want your needs fulfilled. If you're not getting them in the relationship, then it might be time to move forward to figure out what you're going to do next. But I highly recommend you don't decide to stay in the relationship for as long as you can and have another relationship on top of that, because it's just too dangerous. And I don't even mean physically. It could be physically dangerous, but emotionally dangerous. Because I want you to plan out the worst case scenario too. Let's just say that you're texting or you're calling and your significant other finds out. How do they find out? What do they say? What do they do at that point? How does it feel to you? How will it feel to them? Some people may think, well, it doesn't matter what it feels to them because they've been mistreating me. They've been hurting me. You may be right. I mean, I can't disagree with that. You may not feel empathetic toward them, but I want you to go through that scenario in your mind. I want you to visualize it in your mind. What would happen if and when they find out? You've been talking to who? I looked at your phone and I saw all these text messages. You've been saying this to them about us. You've been sharing this about you. You sent them this picture. I mean, this is not a conversation I would ever want to have with my girlfriend. This is why, as a friend, I say, that's crazy, don't do it. But I'm someone who's going to step outside my own judgments, my own opinions, and look at this situation and understand that you're probably being hurt right now. You're probably emotionally hurt and emotionally drained, and you just want to re-energize. You want to feel energized. You want to feel cared for and loved and supported and be treated with kindness and respect. All of that is important, and you should be. Absolutely, you should be. I just want you to be clear in the relationship that you're in, that when you know it's over, that at that point, you make any type of decision to create another relationship. I'm going to keep calling it another relationship because you will be juggling two relationships. That is difficult. And you might say, but Paul, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of this relationship. I can't leave. I can't do anything right now. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? Well, again, if you can come to that decision in your mind, then if that's what you feel you need to do, I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't, but I believe it's important to come to that closure, that important decision in your mind, if the relationship is over or not. I remember someone I dated maybe 25 years ago. She was married, and I was a young kid. I was like in my 20s. And I was excited because I didn't care if she was married or not. I didn't have too many thoughts about it. I just thought, hey, this is great. I get to date someone and it doesn't bother me. I don't think the same way now, but back then it was exciting to me. She was married and she cheated on her husband to be with me. I've never said this on the air, but this is what happened. And we talked about this, and she said, I made the decision a year ago that our marriage was over. And that made me feel better because after I did think about it for a while, thinking that I wouldn't want to be cheated on, when she said that, it did. It made me feel better because she had closed the book on their marriage. She had stopped having sex with him a year ago as well. So really, they were just roommates. And because of that, their marriage was over, even though they were still living together. I tell you this because I don't want to sound like a hypocrite. I don't want you to think that I'm Mr. Perfect, because I was certainly a part of that as well. But I also tell you this because it exploded. It was awful. It was something I would never, ever do again because it's best to think that all of this will be discovered. When it was discovered, it was ugly. It could have been worse, but it was ugly. And I survived it, and we actually ended up staying together for a long time, but it was hard. It was hard. So this certainly is an option for you, but you just have to be prepared that when it's discovered, things will probably be ugly. And you just have to be prepared for that. And I'm going to come full circle here and say, I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just saying if you do, it can be very, very challenging, probably more challenging than what you're dealing with now. And also coming back to what I said about what am I supposed to do in the meantime, if you have closed the door on this relationship and you are just living as roommates, even if you're in an emotionally abusive situation and you can't move out yet, I would highly recommend that you create boundaries in your current romantic relationship so that the other person knows that even though we're married, we're still roommates. It sounds like terrible advice. I'm not giving you this as advice. I'm just telling you this just in case you have already started this emotional affair, or you really just want to get your needs met and you don't know what else to do. I think it's important to create some sort of closure in your current relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean that you go to your husband and say, the relationship contract has been violated and I don't really want to be married to you anymore, but let's keep living together. I don't necessarily think you should do that, although I promote honesty and transparency, and maybe that is a conversation that could or should be had. But if you are already going through the motions, devoid of romance, devoid of sex, it's like a marriage that isn't a marriage at all, then that would have been a decision that you had made clear in your mind, and it was pretty obvious to them as well that this relationship isn't going anywhere. And at that point, I think you would make a decision like that. And I know I just glossed over something that you might be asking yourself. The glossing over part was the sex. What if my significant other wants sex and I don't enjoy it, or it doesn't matter if I enjoy it or not, it's not the emotional connection I want? Can I have an emotional affair then? Well, as a friend, I'm saying, that's crazy, don't do the emotional affair. And as the objective observer, I will say this. Sex is part of a relationship, and when you are still active in that component, it is usually a signal to the other person that the relationship is still a thing. It's still valid. There has been no relationship contract broken because we're still having sex. That could be their thoughts and their belief. Even though they've been awful, they've been treating you badly, if sex is still a component in the relationship and you have an emotional affair, it could be a mixed signal to them. And this goes even further. It dives even deeper into something a little bit more toxic. Like, what if they want sex and I can't say no and they demand it? And if I don't do it, it's just going to get worse for me. Or, definitely that's a terrible situation. If there's sexual abuse involved, then we're at a whole nother level. You didn't mention that in your email, and I'm not going to dive into it in this episode now, but sexual abuse is an entirely different level. It is a terrible violation of your body, of your mind, of your soul, of your spirit, however you want to look at it. It is one of the more impactful violations that can be one of the worst abuses. So you have to be very careful when there is sex in a relationship and you want an emotional affair, or any type of affair, but we're talking about an emotional affair today, outside of that relationship. Because what you're doing is you are indicating to the other person that you're having sex with that there's still a relationship. And I don't know that for sure. I don't know, this person who wrote, I don't know if your husband thinks that because you have sex, there is a relationship, or you should be obligated to sex because you're my wife or whatever. I'm just saying that in a typical relationship, when there's sex, that is one component that makes up the relationship, and it's usually a big component that tells both people that we are in a relationship and there are boundaries. Even if they've broken several or many of the boundaries of that relationship. If they are being emotionally abusive or verbally abusive, if they're emotionally dangerous person, they could have, yes, violated all those boundaries. But if you're still having a sexual relationship, then that can often be interpreted as almost a forgiveness of bad behavior. And I really hate to say that, because if you're being forced, or you feel like if you don't do it, your life will be worse, then I don't want you to think I'm insensitive to that. I completely understand. I mean, I've talked with couples that one of them just continued to have sex with the other one, even though they didn't enjoy it, but it kept the peace. I get it. I totally understand. And this is a very sensitive topic, and everyone's going to look at it a little differently. I just want to give you a perspective. The emotional abuser's perspective may be that even though they do all of this bad behavior, when there is sex, that means there's no accountability. If there's no accountability, it must be okay to them. It must be okay that they've done the bad behavior. I'm not saying that you're accepting it. If you are having a sexual relationship with an emotionally abusive person, I'm not saying that you accept their behavior. I'm just saying they may see it that way because a continuing sexual connection to them may be what tells them that their behavior really can't be that bad. This isn't my opinion, I swear. This is just what might happen in the mind of somebody that is hurting you and is still getting their sexual needs met. And I wanted to put that information in your mind just in case it was happening to you, so it could be helpful in any decisions that you need to make. Because if you're in an abusive situation and there's no accountability for that bad behavior, you're crying, you're telling them to stop, you're doing everything you can, you're saying, I'm going to leave, all these possible losses that they could experience, but they still have sexual intimacy with you, they may think it's all forgiven. So I'm going to throw that in there too. And this isn't pleasant information I'm sharing with you. I don't want to share this with you, but at the same time, I think you need to know it. I think you need to know everything I've said today. If you're in this type of situation, it's important to know. It's important to digest it. It's important to understand what you might be getting yourself into if you introduce another relationship, and just be aware, be observant, and be strong inside yourself. And most of the time in emotionally abusive relationships, almost all the time in fact, you have to do the upfront work in order to get this emotionally abusive behavior to stop. That might mean saying, if it doesn't stop, I'm out of here. It might mean leaving anyway. It might mean withholding sex, or if it's not a romantic relationship, some other loss. Something that tells them what you're doing is unacceptable. And when the loss is finally realized, it's finally understood by the emotionally abusive person who actually cares, who actually can access their empathy and realize that maybe they are being hurtful and they feel bad about that, then maybe you'll see the changes that you want to see. Abusive relationships are very difficult. They're very difficult to navigate. And I absolutely have sympathy for this person who wanted to know my thoughts on an emotional affair. I hope this has been helpful. If maybe not difficult to listen to, but my goal is to empower you so that you can make the best choice for you. So what that is for you, that will be up to you. But there's my thoughts. I hope this helps. No matter what, keep your power. Thanks for tuning in. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. Use the workbook to determine if you are in an emotionally abusive relationship so that it can help you pinpoint the specific unhealthy behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. If you're in a difficult relationship and you want to know what your next steps should be, the workbook will help you make decisions that are right for you. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. If you've discovered that you are doing emotionally abusive behavior and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant because you are. Thank you for joining me. We'll talk again soon.